now. It's been a fantastic journey, and I do hope that all of us are able to have even better journeys than I have had. So we'll go straight into the topic. So like I mentioned, the topic is building serverless applications on AWS. However, we're going to be focusing on, this is part one. So we're going to be focusing on an introduction to serverless. There's going to be a hands-on side of things where we will deploy serverless applications on AWS. I don't want to spoil it, so I'll just dive right in. We're going to be talking about serverless, the origins of serverless. What is serverless? Does it mean that there's no server? Which is what I thought the first time I had serverless. I was thinking there's something floating somewhere. I couldn't get my head around it. But we're going to demystify that today. We're going to be talking about why we should go serverless. Why are people talking about this serverless thing? What's the use? Why should we use it? Is it for me? Is it not for me? We'll talk about that. And then finally, we'll talk and then we'll do in the last section. So we're going to be looking at how to start with serverless today. Like I mentioned, this is part one. So this is more of an introduction. We're going to have another part and hopefully other parts where we will dive into more advanced topics. But for today, we're going to focus on the basics and build something out so that we understand the effect of serverless and why it's useful. So we'll start with the origin of serverless. So what is serverless? Before we talk about serverless, we have to go through the origin story. So I had to tailor this origin story to our environment in Nigeria here. So if you've worked in tech as long as I have, you would have noticed that there was a period where nobody was talking about cloud. What we used to do was we would take, after building as developers, we would take our application, put it in a flash drive, and take it to the server room. And then you give it to the guy that is in charge of the server room, the systems guy, and then they put it on the server for you. If it's not working, you have to go back with your flash, update, take it back. So I don't know, did any of us ever have to go through this? You can use the chat box to say yes or no, so that it can be a bit engaging. I would like you guys to indulge me as well. So did any of us ever go through this kind of setup where you had a server room and you had to go to the server room or deploy, via LAN connections to the server room? I don't know if we ever had that, because that was my early career and it wasn't fantastic, So that was it, basically. That was the first. Yes, so Charles was saying that it's the server guy that handled everything deployment. Exactly. There was one guy that just used to handle everything. And most times we don't even like the guy because the guy is always forming busy. Or he's always, trying to tell you, oh, you didn't do this thing well. It was funny times, but thank God that times have changed. But the problem with that was there was this high management overhead. At that point in time, there was this issue of, oh, somebody, like I just mentioned, there had to be somebody there at every point in time to deploy. And then if there's an issue, there's just a lot that goes on. Managing the server room was, especially very big server rooms. The company I used to work for had a very huge server room with like hundreds of servers. So managing it was usually a big deal. And if there's a problem, then everything is down most times. We have light issues here. So if they're having issues with their generator, everything is down. Then there was this problem of high costs. You couldn't really tell what is going to happen. So most times people will either buy too many servers, and then you find out that there are a lot of servers that are idle, and these are like really expensive servers. We know how servers cost. Servers are not, it's not a small deal to buy a very good server. So people will have this bunch of servers doing nothing because you're trying to anticipate that there is going to be growth, which may never come. And then there was this issue of scalability. On the other side of things, you have less servers, right? And then you now start having a lot of requests because maybe you did an advert or your product has grown so much. You start having requests. What will happen in those kind of situations is in order to add more servers to handle your requests, you now have to turn off the server room or like turn off some of the servers to add more servers, to add more resources, and you're having downtime. And then if that load was just periodic, if it was a thing of maybe it's Christmas time and people just wanted to buy a bunch of things for their family members, and it goes down in January where everybody, Sakpa is worrying everybody in January, then you have issues where you've bought too many servers and you can't do anything about it because you have to wait till December for that load to go up again. And then there was now this issue of deployment. Every time we want to deploy, you have to go to the server room or you have to give it to one server guy. And sometimes where I used to work, the problem we even had was that we couldn't deploy every time we finished building because we have to wait till Thursday every week. So everything you're working on, you batch it. Make sure it's working on your system. They will draw your ear, make sure it's working before you give it to the server guy because the next time is going to be next Thursday. So there was that problem. And it was just crazy to manage. At the time, we didn't know better. So we felt like we were doing the right thing. And then we moved to the next phase, which is now this part of shared and dedicated hosting. Like I said, I'm tailoring it to Nigeria and what we have seen happen over the years. So in this way, we would go to places like GoDaddy, HostGator, or our very own Google Host. You go there, you get a server, you put your application on there. Fantastic. That was like magic to us. It was like the savior has come, the Messiah has come for us developers and for us systems people because it solved a lot of problems for us, but there were still problems. There was still this problem of vertical scaling, which is the fact that when you buy a server, when you rent a server online from these guys, whenever you wanted to scale, they would have to turn off your server and help you scale. And for some of them in the early days, you couldn't even scale to start with. So we had that problem of when your request goes up, you now start looking for another provider that can scale or that can handle your requests. There was also this issue of a single point of failure. If there's something wrong with your server, everything has gone down the drain because nobody can use your service. We had lower costs, which was an advantage. And then we had this issue of lack of specialized technical support. I'll tell you a story from my own experience. So I was working on an Elixir application, right? Elixir is a programming language that is used for systems where you're doing a lot of concurrency. It's good at handling concurrency and like multiple requests coming in at the same time. So we use that language for a product I had worked on in the past. And then we were hosting it on one of these hosting providers. They were offering support for every language, but once we mentioned Elixir, there was an issue because the problem was our application was working. There was an update done to their servers and it stopped. And there was no way for us to get our application back up. In fact, what happened at that point in time was we had to shelve that application. We had to basically shelve that one and rebuild it with Python at the time. So eventually they came back to us and said, oh, we have somebody that can solve this problem for you, but we were done already. And then when they even called the price for the person, it was like what it would have cost us to basically start again. It was in thousands of dollars, basically. That was the price to rent that person for a period of a week. So we had these issues with them and it didn't solve our problem. And then came the phase that we're still in now, which is cloud platforms like AWS, Azure, and GCP. They are the three most popular. And what this did for us is we now had the freedom to do whatever we wanted to do. We had improved scalability. You can scale up and down. You can do that automatically using auto-scaling groups on AWS. You can be highly available, so you don't have, a lot of issues with your redundancy. You could manage your costs better because with cloud platforms, you're basically almost always paying for what you use. So it was easy to say, okay, this is how much I'll spend. This is how much I'm not going to spend. And then we now have access to a wide range of specialized services. In fact, yesterday or day before yesterday, I was looking at doing something for one of my clients in Nigeria here. He wants to build a game. And that was the first time I was hearing that AWS has a service that can help you build a game quickly. It will provision all your infrastructure. It will give you access to Unity from the console. You can do a lot with it. So there's, even for things as specialized as gaming, which is a very specialized industry, there are services for almost everything. So this solved a lot of our problems. But then we also still had this issue of I'm talking about developers now. So us as developers, most times we just want to write our code and push it, right? We don't want to care about who is handling infrastructure. We don't want to care about, we just want to write code most times. And we still have this issue with cloud platforms where if you're using services that are not serverless, you still have to provision a lot of things. You still have to have someone, a specialized person managing certain things. And then you now have the case of startups. We know there are a lot of startups in Nigeria that are in fintech, which I've worked in extensively as well. I've worked in the fintech industry. There's a lot of startups that are springing up. Now imagine these startups needed to hire a DevOps engineer, needed to hire a data analyst, needed to hire developers, needed to hire all of these people just to build something. And as a startup, maybe they are still looking for funding. How do they go about it? So it means they cannot build on the cloud, because they can't afford all of that. So there comes serverless. And we're going to be talking about serverless now. Serverless is as a result of the cloud platform. So without cloud platforms, we wouldn't really have serverless. So it enabled serverless. Now, what is serverless? Serverless does not mean there's no servers. So I need to demystify that now. It doesn't mean there's no servers. There are servers, but you're not the one provisioning them. You're not the one managing those servers. You're not the one going on the server to update it so that you can make sure that one hacker out there does not see a vulnerability in your system and get into it. You're not the one doing all of that. The cloud platform does that for you. All you're doing is writing your code, defining the configuration files for your code, and pushing them up to the cloud provider. They will deploy it. They will scale it up and down. So that's where the automatic scaling comes in. They will scale it up and down based off of the demands of that system is experiencing. So based on the requests that are coming in, your load will go up and down. And you're only paying for that usage. So as the load goes up and down, you're paying for the cost. You're not paying for renting a server. So on AWS, you're not paying for renting like a very powerful EC2 instance. You're just paying for the requests that are coming in, and that you're servicing at any point in time. Also, you're not doing stuff like deploying your applications in multiple regions so that you don't basically go down. You're not doing stuff like that. The cloud provider helps you to do that. You just need to define that in your configuration, and that's done for you. So that's serverless in a nutshell. It is basically, you don't have to provision anything or manage anything infrastructure-wise. You don't have to worry about scaling. It scales up and down to meet demand. You're only paying for what you use, and it is highly available and secure. So the security side, there's a caveat there. It is secure based off of the infrastructure, but you still have to ensure that your applications are built to be secure. You won't say, because I'm working on serverless, you will not put any authentication on your APIs and be wondering why somebody got access to your information. You still have to secure your APIs, but the cloud provider is giving you the assurance that their servers are fine. They are always updated with the latest security patches, so you don't need to be worried about all of that. So we'll move on from here. And next, we will be talking about serverless on AWS. So what are the serverless offerings on AWS? If you wanted to start building on AWS today, what are the offerings on AWS? There are a lot of them. So what I did was I picked out the most used ones and the ones that would help you get started much more easily. And what are they? We have different categories. So I'm starting with compute, and compute is basically the side that enables you to run your application logic. So where you write your code, where your logic, application logic is housed, that is the compute side. So that's where it is computed, basically. And then we have the most popular of AWS serverless offerings. It's called AWS Lambda. So what is Lambda? Lambda is you write functions, and I'm going to show that in the hands-on. If you're a JavaScript developer, if you're a Python developer, if you do Golang, you're writing a function. So it's like declaring a function, writing logic inside, and then pushing it up to AWS. AWS will return whatever you have written in that function back. It will spit it out, to whoever is calling that function. So that's AWS Lambda. It's mostly called function as a service. Then we have Fargate. For those of us that, work with containers, you work with Docker a lot, you work with Kubernetes a lot. Fargate enables you to be able to deploy all that. Helps you to be able to manage that easily. You just need to define the configuration, scales up and down for you. How many of us have used Kubernetes here? You can say yes in the chat. If you've used Kubernetes, you would know that managing a Kubernetes cluster is not beans, right? You have to have a lot of knowledge. You have to have a lot of hands-on as well if you're managing a Kubernetes cluster, especially if you're working in an environment that is very, like fintech. I always use fintech as an example because you're receiving requests every second and people are trying to access your services illegitimately. So Fargate helps you to be able to do that, without breaking a sweat. You don't have to be worrying about your pods and how you're going to provision them and all of that. You just give configuration and AWS helps you to scale out scaling on demand. Then we have services like API Gateway. API Gateway is just an API gateway, like the name implies. So if you send a request from the internet, it is what takes your request and gives it to the service that will handle that request. So that's API Gateway. We also have AppSync, which is, if you've worked with GraphQL, it's the GraphQL equivalent of API Gateway. You can see it as that. There's a lot more to it, but you can see it as the GraphQL equivalent, is the client for AWS. Then we have SQS, which is like the oldest service on AWS. It is actually the first service that was offered to the public by AWS. What is it? Who has used RabbitMQ here? If you've used a queuing service like RabbitMQ, I know that's probably the most popular one in Nigeria from what I've seen. So we have SQS that does basically the same thing. But in this instance, you're not provisioning it. It scales up and down as needed. You're not managing your RabbitMQ infrastructure. Then we have SNS, which is a notification service. It just forwards whatever request that you get, forwards it to whoever needs it. So I'm explaining these things in basic terms, but there's really a lot more that goes on behind the scenes. Then we have EventBridge, which is an event bus. If you've ever worked with event buses, EventBridge is basically probably my favorite AWS service because you can do a lot with it. It helps you to integrate different AWS services and even external services with each other, helps you with communication and sending things back and forth between them. Then we have step functions, which is also very popular and a service that I really like because it helps you to orchestrate workflows. So if there's a situation where you need to have a workflow, so for example, when the request comes in, it needs to hit this guy, and then if it's successful, it should go this way. If it's not successful, it should go that way. Then step functions is a prime candidate for that. And then finally, the data side of things. We have S3, which is a very popular service. Even people that don't use AWS have probably used S3 because it's very popular. It's a file, like basically enable you to store files and be able to retrieve them in a very quick manner. A lot of people don't know it's serverless, but it's actually serverless because you don't know what happens behind the scenes. All you do is you drop your files and you get them back. It scales infinitely and you don't have to manage anything. We have DynamoDB, which is a NoSQL offering, kind of similar to MongoDB, but they're not the same. But you can think of it in the same vein as a MongoDB. We have Aurora Serverless, which has created a lot of controversy. It's basically a database like a MySQL or a Postgres that allows you to, it's a relational database to store things like financial data, to work with transactions, and it's serverless according to AWS, but I won't get into that argument. A lot of people don't think it's serverless just because of the features that I had mentioned earlier. So I don't know if you guys are hearing me. Can I get an amen or yes? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, guys. Okay, so we'll move forward to the next side, which is the side that I'm sure a lot of us are interested in, and it's why we should go serverless. Now, going serverless, we need to go serverless because of the following things. One, on-demand execution. If you're working with serverless, it's at the point that you need to do something that you get billed. Basically, that's when your infrastructure is spun up for most of the serverless services. So it's on demand that the execution of your application logic or whatever is done. And that basically saves you a lot of money. Sometimes it can save time for you as well in some instances. You're only paying for what you use. So you're only paying for the amount of executions of whatever serverless offering that you're using. You don't have a server to manage. So if you want to build something really quickly, if you want to get to market really quickly, and you guys are going to see that in the hands-on, you don't necessarily need to hire somebody to manage your servers and go through all those ups and downs. You're going straight to building and deploying your application. And in a matter of, minutes, sometimes seconds, you have your APIs up, you have your application up, and you can start playing with it. In some cases, it also gives you shorter execution time. It's elastic, and what that means is you can scale up and down on demand. It's not, you're not managing that process of, a lot of requests are coming in, you have to add more resources. It does that for you. As requests are coming in, more resources are added. As requests are reducing, your resources are reducing, and you don't have to worry about that. It doesn't mean that your service will go down because that's happening. So it's elastic. And then it's event-driven, which is one of the main reasons why serverless is so important. We live in an environment now where a lot of services that we're working with work based off of events. So if this happens, what should happen? Serverless is a prime candidate for that because it is based on events. So you can, the opportunities are limitless. What you can do is limitless. You decide how you want to deal with your events, and there are a lot of services that you can use to manage your events and get what you need out of it without, sometimes writing too much code or having to provision a lot of stuff. Now we'll look at the benefits now. There's a low barrier of entry if you want to work with serverless. You just need to know how to write code. That's the basic thing you need to know. You don't need to know how to, provision servers. You don't need to know how to do a lot of nuances around coding that we know. All you need to know is how to write a function in a language that is supported. So it gives that low barrier of entry. There are faster deployments. You don't have to wait a long time for your deployment. So we'll see that in the hands-on. You just deploy and you have your API up or your service up, and you can start working with it. It saves money. Because you're not having to pay for things that you cannot estimate how much usage you will have to, use, if that's the best way to put it. You're not paying a lot of money that you don't need to pay. You're only paying for what you use. You have better scalability, which we've already touched, and then you have better security as well. So we'll move right into the future of serverless, just so that you know what the future is for serverless. This is from the state of serverless. There's this report that comes out every year, the state of serverless, by a very well-renowned company called Datadog, and told us that invocations of Lambda functions, remember we talked of Lambda already, invocations of Lambda functions grew by 3.5 times from 2019 to 2022. And that shows you that there's a lot of growth in people adopting serverless. A lot of companies are moving to serverless, or at least moving part of their infrastructure to serverless. So it has become like something that you need to know. One. Secondly, you need to scale up on so that you're able to be relevant to the tech ecosystem going forward. Then, for every cloud provider, at least 50% of the people on that cloud are using serverless services. In fact, on AWS, is over 70% are using serverless in one form or the other. So that just shows you where the world is going as regards serverless. Then some of the companies that use serverless, you can see some popular guys like Netflix, Samsung, Nike. We have iRecharge in Nigeria here. MoneyPoint also uses serverless in Nigeria here. We have even drug companies like Novartis. We have Terminus, PwC, and even Coca-Cola. So people that build things online now, a lot of them are moving to serverless. So it's just some information that we need to know, that there's a future in serverless. It's not going away anytime soon. And then the final section before we get into the hands-on is going to be about how we would go serverless. So as a beginner, or somebody that has never used serverless before, how do I get started? You need to have an AWS account. You can sign up. I'm guessing if you're here, you probably have an AWS account. I'm guessing that's true. True or false? Please reply with true or false. If you're here today, you probably have an AWS account. So you've even fulfilled criteria one. You need to have a PC. You need to have a Mac or a PC. I don't know why I wrote a PC, but you need to have basically a computer, a laptop that you can use. And then you need to have knowledge of at least one of the following languages. We have Node.js, we have Python, Java, .NET, Ruby, or Golang. You need to have, these are the ones that are supported out of the box on AWS. You can bring your own runtime if you want, but it's a bit more advanced. But if you have knowledge of these languages, you can start building today with serverless. We're going to now go into the hands-on because I can see that we are close to the hour mark. So we'll go into the hands-on. But then, trivia time. I'm going to be asking a question, and the person that gets the first person that responds with the right answer is going to get a gift or like something. I don't know what it is. I will not spoil it. Akim will let you know. But if you are listening to my presentation, then you should answer this easily. Now, are you guys ready? Can I get an amen or a yes? Are you ready? Okay. So, what was the first service on AWS? Okay, so Onyedika has gotten it, SQS. It was SQS. I saw someone write EC2 and somebody say S3. The S3 person was actually very close because S3 came right after SQS. But it's SQS. And the first person that got it was Enyedika Sams. And Akim has already responded to you. So congratulations, Enyedika. So we'll move forward now. We'll go straight into the hands-on. So what will our hands-on entail, you might ask? We're going to be deploying some APIs via the AWS console first, because we need to do that just to understand how serverless works. And then we would use the serverless framework, which is an infrastructure as code tool. There are a lot of them there. There's one called SAM, AWS SAM. You can also use like a Terraform. You can use a bunch of others, but we're going to be using a serverless framework today, not because it's better than the others, but it's just a matter of personal preference. You can use whichever one you want. You can also use CDK if you wanted to deploy serverless. Basically, anything that can enable you to deploy those services that we spoke about earlier. Excuse me. Sorry. On AWS, then you can use any of them to deploy your, serverless application. So we'll go right into the AWS console, which I already have open here. This is what the homepage looks like. I'm sure we're familiar with this. And what we'll be doing is we're going to be deploying a Lambda function. We'll deploy a function, we'll test it out and see that it works. So I'm going to click on Lambda now. If you don't see it on your own screen, you can look for it here. Just type Lambda, you'd see it from the console. I think AWS actually has, in my opinion, you can argue with me all you want, you will not win me. But AWS actually has the best interface for a beginner, in my opinion. So we'll click on Lambda. And I've written some functions before now, so you can just ignore those ones, but we're going to be starting from scratch. So we're going to be building a new function. So you click on create function, excuse me, and then we're going to be authoring from scratch just so that we can learn. But there are different ways you can build a Lambda function. You can use a blueprint. If you say you want to use a blueprint, there are a lot of options. You can have functions that already have a lot of things. So you can explore this in your own time. This is also something that I feel like AWS gives us out of the box, which is why it's an amazing platform. You can also deploy a container image as a Lambda function. So you can do that as well. But we'll be doing authoring from scratch, and I'll call my function ANUG test. They recently launched Node.js 20, so we'll just use it. You can use other versions of Node.js. You can just click here and look for the version of Node.js that you would like if you want. The other languages are Go, Java, Python, and Ruby, but we'll be using Node.js. Like I said, it's not because it's the best, or like I said when I was talking about the IAC tool, it's not because it's the best. It's just because it's a matter of personal preference for me. I've seen a lot of people in Nigeria use Node more than they use like a Python. I think those two are neck and neck when it has to do with serverless. You can explore the other stuff, but we'll just be going with the settings that are, default settings on AWS. So we'll just click on create function, and we'll see how quickly we can get up and running on AWS. So it's loading. I hope it's not my internet too. Okay, so we're here now. So we have our function has been created. And if we look into the dashboard, we can already see this function has been created. We can, see a lot of things here, but I will not overwhelm you with a lot of explanations. We'll just go straight to the point. Now, if we go down, scroll down a little, we can see our function. Like I told you guys, these are just functions. These are just functions. If you write Node here, you would notice that this is just a regular function on Node. There's no, Serene, as we say, going on here. This is just a function or node, like every other function that you would write. The only thing that you would notice is that the response follows a particular format, which we will talk about. Now, this function has already been written. It's saying hello from Lambda, right? I just removed the comment, so I would need to deploy in order to test the function. So if I just click on deploy, the function has been deployed right now. Now, let me show you that it has been deployed by changing something. So let's say hello from ANUG, and then we deploy again. It's been deployed. So if I click on test here, I'm able to test my function. All I need to do is to just, I'm not going to edit anything. I'll just click on invoke. Once I invoke the function, it has shown me the response. It has shown me some other information, the amount of time the function took to run and all of that. But it has shown me hello from ANUG, what we just changed now. But this function, as it is now, it's going to be looking useless because we can't really do much with it. We can just test it from the console. So we're going to do something pretty cool right now. What we're going to do is we're going to add a trigger. And that is where some of the other services that we talked about will come in. So we're going to add an API gateway to this function so that we can call it from outside this console. We can call it from the web. We can call it using a tool like Postman. So if I click on add trigger here, that's how we can add a trigger. If you look at the source, there are a lot of sources. There are a lot of things that can send events. Like I mentioned, serverless is event driven. It's built on that concept. So if I click on API gateway here, it means that I am saying attach an API gateway to this function so that when a request comes in, it sends it to this function. We'll just go through it. We'll say create a new API. There are two types of API. There's the HTTP API and the REST API. I think in part 2, we'll expand on them. But for now, we'll go with REST API. You can add security. You can use IAM, you can keep it open, or you can add an API key. Just because this is a beginner level, part 1 is a beginner level workshop. I'll click on open, and then I will add the API gateway to it. So now we've added an API gateway. Our API gateway is showing right now that it's added as a trigger for the Lambda function. And if we scroll down a little, we would see I think I forgot to do something, but anyways, let's see. We would see the function, the API gateway. And if we look, we can see the endpoint. Now, if I visit this endpoint, I should see hello from ANUG. Let's go. Right there. So now we can call these endpoints from anywhere. And we get this. But this doesn't look like an API response, right? It just looks like text. So let's modify it a little bit, right? And I'm going to stop sharing and then share my entire screen so that we can do it via Postman, because I know that's what we're used to. So one moment, I will share my entire screen now. Let me know if you can still see the screen. Yes, no? Okay, thank you guys. So I'll go to Postman, and what I will do, don't mind a lot of these things that you're going to see. It's basically the work I do. So I'm just going to create a new collection quickly. I will call it ANUG. Save it, add a new request. We'll just call it test for now. And then we'll add our endpoint that we just got from API gateway. If I click on send, I should still see hello from ANUG. But let's return JSON. Let's return something that, looks nice. We'll go back to test, code, and modify the code now. So here, This status code, we'll leave it as it is because that's the status code of the HTTP request. But then we'll modify this where it says JSON.stringify. Add a JavaScript object here. Let's return. I'm from a fintech background, so I'll just return a standard fintech response. We'll save this, we'll deploy it. And once it tells us it has deployed, fantastic, we'll go ahead to our Postman and run this request again. And boom, we've gotten our JSON with a 200 response, status of true, and the data that we passed to it. So this should show you how quickly we can get started with serverless. We didn't need to go and do an EC2 instance. We didn't need to install a lot of things on EC2, install a lot of dependencies. We didn't need to do all that. We just came here, provisioned our, I said provision, sorry. Provision has been coming out a lot, but we just created a Lambda function and we're able to get started in a matter of minutes. I was looking at the time from when I created the function till now, and it's been exactly 6 minutes. So you can see how quickly we can get up and started with serverless. Like we just created an API. Yes, it's not robust, but we did create an API this quickly. Now imagine doing it using a serverful kind of approach. It will take you at least a few hours to get that done. That's if you're experienced. Now we've done this through the console. Everything is working. Thank God, it's fine. But when we want to build applications at scale, this might not be practical because it means that every time that we want to edit something, we have to come inside the console, come to this code part of things, have to do all of this, inside their own editor, which we are not used to. We want to do this through a VS Code, an Atom, or a Sublime Text, or whatever you use. You want to do it from that environment. So that's what we're going to be looking at next. We're going to be looking at how to deploy something like this with serverless framework. So we'll go straight into that. Now, how do we get serverless framework on our systems? Very simple. I'm not going to go through it, but you can literally just you can just type serverless framework, search for serverless framework, and you're able to get started easily, right? If you just see this link, click on install, you're able to get started. You have to have NPM, you have to have node and NPM on your system and run this command, and then you can get started easily. So we're going to be creating a service with it. I've already installed it on my system, so we'll just go ahead and create a service. So I'll open up my terminal and I will just say serverless. Boom. So I should be presented with a bunch of options. So you see that there's support for Node.js and Python here, which is what is most used anyways. If you select other, you can use any other language you want as well. But these ones give you a starter, like it gives you a head start. So we're going to use the Node.js starter just because we want to do it from scratch. We want to build an API from scratch. So I'll just click enter, and then we'll call it NUG SLS. SLS is also a short form for serverless. SLS intro. And then it will download everything that we need, and then we can start. So let's give it a few moments. So it's been created. For now, I don't want to register for their dashboard. And I don't want to deploy now because I want to show you how we can deploy. So it's been created. I will just navigate to that folder that has been created in. And then I'll open VS Code. You guys can see my entire screen, right? It's not just one thing? Yes, no? Okay, yes. All right, so we're inside VS Code now, and we can see what a serverless project looks like. So a project that is done with serverless framework, what it looks like. We have the standard git ignore so that you don't deploy if you're pushing, or so that you don't push things that you're not supposed to push to GitHub. And then we have an index.js. Now, if we look at this function, isn't it very similar to the function that we saw on the AWS dashboard, right? It's very similar. So this is a function. This is a file that contains a function that we've already seen. So it's nothing too strange. And then that's how you define your functions. So you define your functions as files, just like when you're working with Node.js. If you want to define, an API endpoint, most times you would create a new file. So that's how you do it here. There's also the README, which we won't go too much into. And then there's this file, which is where you will now define your resources, or, it's like your infrastructure as code file. So this is where you will define anything that you want to be created. You define your functions here before they are created. So if you look here, there's index.handler, there's the functions directive, and then there's a function called function1, and then the handler is index.handler. So basically it's just this index function and the handler, basically the handler function inside the index file. Also, the file contains the name of the service that we created. Remember when I typed out ANUG SLS intro? The version of the framework, serverless framework we're using is version 3. And then we're using AWS with Node.js 18, which the difference is not so much. It's negligible. So I'm going to modify this function, but I want to deploy first. Now, in order to deploy, you have to create a profile on AWS. And what does that mean? You have to go into your console and it's like giving what you're doing is that you're giving your CLI. So that's your VS Code in this instance, the permissions to deploy to AWS. So in order to do that, you have to go to a service called IAM. Some people say IAM. You have to create a profile on IAM and then get the credentials for that profile and use it. So for the purposes of this, I'm going to create a profile and use it. I created one earlier today, but I want to go through that process since this is a beginner class or workshop. So I'll just create a new user. I'll call this user ANUG SLS intro as well. I don't want to have access to the console with this user. I just want to do only from like my terminal, basically. I just want to access it from only my terminal. Sorry, having issues moving this Zoom stuff around. So I'll just assign administrator permissions. Now you don't have to do this. You should only assign permissions to the services that you'll be working with. But for the purpose of this workshop, I'm going to give administrator permissions for the workshop. So I'll just say yes. And I'll create the user. I've created the user, but I need to have the keys, the access keys that will enable me to be able to call or deploy to AWS from my system. So I'll go to security credentials and I will create an access key. I'm going to be calling it from the command line. AWS is giving me some recommendations, but I'll just go ahead for the purpose of this lecture. for this workshop. I keep saying lecture. Maybe I should become a lecturer. I'll just give it a tag of ANUG and create my access keys. Now I have my access keys showing. I'm going to delete this, obviously, immediately after this class. But I need them to be able to configure an AWS profile. Now, how do I configure it? This is how. I would go to VS Code Integrated Terminal, and I would run a command. So AWS configure -- profile. I'll just call it ANUG. So I'm supposed to be prompted to enter those keys that I just got. So I've entered the access key. I'll enter the secret key. For my default region, I'll use the popular US East one. And then output format, I'll say JSON, and I've created my key, right? Now, in order to deploy, I'm going to deploy this function now. In order to deploy, I will just do serverless deploy. I'm using a named profile. You can just do serverless deploy like this, but it's also not recommended usually when you're working on your system. It's recommended to create a profile and then deploy using that profile so that you don't deploy what you're not supposed to deploy, or you deploy to an environment that you're not supposed to deploy to. So in this, I'm going to be using the profile that I just created in this instance. And the way to do that with serverless is to do this and then give it the name of the profile. So it's currently deploying, and it's by default, it deploys to a stage called dev. So that's your development environment. If we're familiar with stages, we have development, we have staging, and we have production most times. So by default, serverless will deploy to your dev environment so that you don't go and break prod, right? Who has broken prod here before? I have. Yes. So somebody asks, is AWS installed locally? Yes. Yes. Thank you for pointing that out. So you have to install AWS, the AWS CLI tool locally on your system. If you want to do that while this is deploying, there's a guide.
I hope
Yes.
you forgot. You don't forget to delete your AWS key.
Oh, I will definitely forget. I will definitely do it. I'm not going to forget.
Okay.
I've worked in fintech, so I fear everything. And this account is actually a personal account. It's not
Oh, okay.
something. Now
Okay.
I wouldn't do that. So you can just simply do a search. And go through the AWS documentation. But what I will do is I'm going to also, I will also send a guide for both installing serverless and installing AWS CLI, both on Mac and Windows. So I'm going to do that after this call. I'll send that to Akim this weekend so that he can share it with you guys. So is that okay, Danjuma? And thank you so much for reminding me. Okay. So now our function has actually been sent, and it took 115 seconds, which is approximately 2 minutes to get that deployed. So 2 minutes to deploy your function, which is really good. And this happened because it's the first time that we're deploying. But remember what I mentioned before. The function that we've deployed right now is not doing anything. We're not necessarily able to interact with it from outside of AWS. So what we're going to do is we're going to add an API gateway, and I'm going to show you how to do that now. First of all, I'm going to rename this function because I don't like the name function1. I'm just going to call it, test. It is always, or let me call it ANUG, just for the fun of it. It's always recommended that you call your function, then your function definition here should match the function definition, like the name of your function. So I'm going to go ahead, after changing this, I would also change this to anug.handler, save this, and rename this to anug. It's not a fantastic name, I know, but for the purposes of this, we'll just do that. So I'm going to add an API gateway to this, and it's as simple as just working with YAML. So a lot of us, I don't want us to get discouraged by YAML. There's a lot of resources that can enable you to understand YAML. If you understand JSON, then YAML would even be easier for you to understand if you've never used YAML. So it's what is used for, declaring your serverless framework like infrastructure. There's also the ability for you to use JSON here, but you have to specify that when you're creating your serverless framework project. You can say you want to use JSON to define your infrastructure, and they have that functionality as well. So if you're not comfortable with this, you can also do that. But I'll go ahead and create an API gateway. And in order to do that, this is basically the format that you follow. I'm also going to be putting this up on GitHub so that anybody that wants to play around with this after now can go ahead to GitHub and do that. And then we'll allow calls.
Someone is asking to zoom your IDE.
Oh.
Maybe they're having trouble.
Sorry. What's the speed key for that? I've forgotten.
I think it's control. Is it
Control plus? Yeah.
Plus, yeah, control plus.
One moment. Okay, I'm trying it. Okay. How does this look now? Is it better? Okay. Thank you. Thank you for pointing that out. I've just kept going. So what we just did was we just changed the name of the function. We're also defining an API gateway for this function so that we're able to access the function outside of AWS. Basically what we did through the console, we're doing it. So you can do that with this events directive. We're attaching a HTTP endpoint to it, which resolves to an API gateway. And then we're saying the path is going to be ANUG. And what that means is after the function, after the URL, the URL path is going to have /ANUG, and it's going to be a get, it's going to support only get requests. We're also enabling calls so that we can access it from anywhere, any browser. So I've saved this. We're going to run, well, it's basically the same function, but we're going to deploy it now, and then we're going to get the URL for it. So because I'm a lazy engineer, I'll just press my up key and deploy again. Okay, so it's deploying now. And in this time, we're going to have trivia number 2. Who is ready for that? Are we ready? You guys should tell me through the chat. Okay. So we have trivia number 2. Fastest fingers as usual.
As usual, yeah.
So Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. I want you guys to ginger up small. I'm thinking of a hard question now to ask. Hard one this time around because I'm one of those teachers that you should run away from in secondary school. Yeah. So, I mean, we've said a whole lot in this period of time, right? But the first person to give me 3 supported languages for building serverless applications, like working with AWS Lambda, 3 supported languages. This guy you know even not even waste time. I just the talk. Just
People are so energetic. Look at that.
wow, that was fast. Okay, so congratulations to. Let me not murder your name, but let me just say Olusoga. I hope I didn't kill your name, but forgive me if I did.
Sugar. Okay, he's the first one that types something.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the first person. Some of you,
Nice.
what happened is slow internet made your own not to show first because because I can see that most of them are at the same time, but now the one we reach
Yeah,
first.
they are the same time, but it looks like
Yeah,
Sugar is the one that
yeah. So Olusoga, congratulations. You're number 2. Yeah, Charles, I was shocked too. See, now wow. So we've deployed the function right now, and we've gotten a URL. This is the URL right here. So serverless framework is kind enough to give you that URL as soon as you deploy. So I'll just copy it and I'll test it out on Postman. But before I do, just to show you that we're not doing film trick here, I'm going to go to before some of you say we're doing, the more you look, the less you see. Maybe that's how they say it. We'll go back to the AWS Lambda on the console, and we should see this function that we just created. So this is it. So this is the name of the service. This is dev, which is the environment, and this is the name of the function. So we're seeing that this function has been deployed using serverless framework. We're able to deploy the function just 2 minutes ago. So we know that it was successful. I've copied the URL already, so I'll just go straight to Postman and just call that URL and see what we get. So I call the URL now, and boom, Go serverless 3.0, your function executed successfully, which is what we have here, right? But we see this very long, confusing guy right here. So we're supposed to have an input and something, but we're seeing something very long. And that long thing is the event that is coming from API gateway. Remember, I told you guys, serverless is event-driven. So the event came from API gateway, and this is the event that came in. So we have the event. It's showing us a lot of stuff. We don't want to see a lot of stuff, right? So let's get the IP address that the event came from. So let's do that now. So I'm going to modify this response just to show you guys that it all works. It's all coming together. What I will do is I will stick to my fintech response. I know some of you want to beat me for saying fintech every time, but it's not my fault. Then I'll say, let's call it source IP. And to get the source IP, I already know this because I'm conversant with the events on AWS. So I already know this, but if we take some time to look at that event, we would be able to see how I got this. If you map this path to the event, then you'd be able to see how I'm able to get this. So I'll save this. So we should see my IP address, basically. What IP address is this request coming from? So we should see my IP address. So I've saved it and I will click, sorry, I have to deploy first, because if I go and test it now, it's still the same thing that will come back. So lazy again, I just deploy. And you see how much, by the time we run this, you see how much we're able to do. This deployment should be faster than the previous one because I've deployed the function before. I just changed something. So it should be, the other one took 58 seconds. This should be marginally less or maybe the same. I don't know. These things can shock you sometimes. But let's just wait a little bit for it to be done. But I hope you guys can already see how quickly we can start building things on AWS using serverless. I hope you guys can see that already. Right? Yes, no? Thank you. Thank you for the engagement, guys. So it just shows you that building serverless applications, like we've been here for approximately an hour now, or an hour, 30 minutes now, and we have already been able to deploy 2 APIs. We've already been able to modify those APIs, get started with even setting things up on the system and all of that. We're able to do that in the space of, an hour and 30 minutes approximately. So it's something that is here to stay. You can see the value you're getting from it already, just from this short period of time. And hopefully, or not hopefully, definitely in part 2, we'll build something that is more realistic so that you see that it still doesn't take too long to get started, connect it to a database, push things to the database, fetch things from database, add authentication to it. It's not a whole process as it would be when you're creating an application that is serverful. So we've deployed. It's still the same endpoint. I don't necessarily need to copy, but now we should see that it has changed. The response has changed. So I'm going to run it again, and we should see my IP address now. Exactly. So this is my IP.
Awesome.
And I was able to just fetch my IP and display it immediately, just to confirm that it's my IP. And I like, because we're Nigerians, we like proof. They do not carry us go where we know. This is the IP. This is my IP, right? And we can see that it matches what, okay, it has changed. So I don't carry on go where I know. My IP has changed basically. But if I run it again, I should get the updated IP. Why?
Different IP.
Yeah. That's
Oh,
weird.
it's probably picking, maybe catching your IP, right?
Yeah, probably. But my Airtel tends to change anyways. The IP tends to change every now and then. But
Right.
this is Lambda is reporting the IP address that API gateway is saying the request is coming from. So that is it. We've already gone a minute past time. I had wanted to do a post endpoint, but I don't know if we can do that today. I wanted to send something via the request and then show you guys how you can catch it and work with it and display something. But I don't know if we have the time for that, Akim.
We can
If you
ask
guys
the
want that.
we can ask
Yeah,
people
is that what you guys
if you guys wanted to maybe another 15 minutes, right?
Yeah, another
You
endpoint,
guys,
just one more.
yeah, if you guys
Ah,
wanted to hang in for another 15 minutes, all right, it's all go on. So
Cody nice. Yes, go on. Cody nice answering for 5 people.
all right, so maybe while you're getting ready, we can throw in another trivia question.
Okay.
I think, let me see if I can get this right. All right. I'm gonna post
You
the
got one?
question. I got one. Uh, I wanna post this in the. All right, guys. This is gonna.
Yeah, let's see.
All right. Fast fingers.
Okay, have you posted it?
I just posted it.
Okay.
Oh, maybe I posted it.
Yeah, it's showing now.
So which of these is uh let me rephrase the question, sorry. I
So
think
people have started.
the
These are
so
people that don't used to waste time.
let me rephrase the question again. It's a little confusing.
Ah,
Uh,
see, now, start answering you already.
so which of these is not the feature of using serverless?
Yeah, I mean, are we going with half answers?
The options are amazing.
All right, I think we get it. We get yep. Codina.
Yeah,
Codina.
code.
Codina is the
Yeah,
one that
I've gotten it.
Codina. Codina got it. Okay. All right. So your
Why
email,
not make the
Codina.
answer ABC?
It's just to give you challenges too now.
So,
Sorry, guys.
Charles wants to give this for headache, but Charles.
I just I just want you guys
Don't
to
comment.
take
You should just go ahead.
I don't know. Go, Alice.
it.
Charles wants to win. Charles
No.
is not.
You should just go ahead. You should just go ahead.
I just with
All
ABC.
right.
I'll just I know. Oh,
All right.
you can go ahead, please.
Congrats, Ordina. Congrats, and we're going to just work on another function now, so that we can see how we can create multiple functions, and that we can also see how we can send, excuse me, our own data to the server or to our function, be able to work with our own data, and just see another side to things before we do the part 2 later, where we'll cover like a whole lot of stuff. So yeah, we're going to create another endpoint. Now, I just did copy and paste. If you wanted to type this out, you can type it out. I did copy and paste, and I'm going to just change something. So what are we going to be doing now? We're going to do a small mini fake raffle kind of situation, where we're building an endpoint that will take the person's name, generate a raffle number, and return that raffle number to them. So something simple, but imitating a real life situation. So we'll call it raffle. We'll say raffle.handler, like we said. Remember, this is a serverless.yml file. That's where you're going to define the function that you're going to be creating. So we want the path to be /raffle. So we'll do that as well. And this time we're doing post, not get. We'll save. We'll now create the file. So the handler, basically. So we'll say raffle.js. I'll do copy and paste again because of time, because I'm lazy as well. I'm not afraid to say that I'm a lazy engineer. So we'll just go ahead and work on this real quick. But if you're conversant with Node, then this should be a breeze for you. So first of all, what we're going to do is we're going to get the event body. Remember, I told you that the event usually contains what is coming from API gateway. And in this case, we want to enter a JSON of the person's first name and last name, right? So we're going to catch that response or that request that is coming from API gateway and extract those details from API gateway. So the first name and the last name will extract it. So first we'll assign it to the event to a variable, but we have to JSON.pass it. So basically, like, just to ensure that we get the right thing, we have to pass the event, but inside the event, we're passing the body of the event. So there's a field in the event called the body, which will contain anything that is passed in the body of our request via Postman. We want to do some other stuff here, which is where serverless is, really nice. We want to validate that request body that is coming in. So we want to return an error if the request body is false or is null or something. And then if we don't have the first name, so I'm using camel case in here, it's a preference for me. Then we want to return a standard HTTP response for when you don't have, when you're missing something in your request body. So can anybody tell me what the HTTP response code for that is? Maybe we can do another gift for that. Is this the one you like, Charles? So who can tell me what the HTTP response code is for this scenario that I'm writing code for now?
Oh, sorry.
Charles, how far now?
You really want Charles to win so bad.
Charles has won now. He has won it. I mean, 422 is also permissible because it's unprocessable entity. But 400 is more suited for this. It's more suited for this actually. So Charles has won finally.
Congratulations, Charles.
Hmm?
I didn't know it was a trivia. Okay, thanks.
I mean, you've been long, you've been eager to win, so congratulations, you won.
Well,
so we'll do 400, and then we'll do a standard message of invalid request. And then if everything is there, we now want to return a proper response. So I'll just extract those details, not because of anything, just because I feel like this is my preference. I can decide not to extract it and just pass it in my response from the request. But I'll do that. And then what I want to do is to generate that raffle code. So I will also do that here. I will make use of JavaScript's math functions and just do a 6-digit code. Math.flow 345, and then randomize. So what I'm doing now is basically just returning a random 5. Okay. I'm returning a random 6 digits code as the raffle code. Then for that, I will return, a 200, and I will also return, I'll use backticks here because I want to return JavaScript variables from within my string. And I'll give them their raffle code. Sorry, let me just do this. Boom. So I think we're fine, but you never know you're fine till you run it, right? So I think this should work. Let's just look through it. We got the event body, we validated the event body, and then we're getting our variables, or basically assigning it to variables and then returning a 200 if it's successful. So saved it. I will deploy again, which when we get to part 2, you see how we can make this deployment process a lot better. You know, we would probably do like CI/CD using GitHub in part 2. How many of us are excited for part 2?
I'm excited, looking forward to it.
Okay, I'm looking forward to it too. I think I've enjoyed myself today. Thank you so much, everyone, for the engagement.
All
Really
right,
nice.
so we have, thank you very much, Tobenna. This is very, very amazing workshop. But this is probably one of the best workshops we have so far. Very intense. You know, I hope everybody learned something. And there's going to be recording. And then please, Tobenna, if you can give us the GitHub at, that would also be wonderful. Okay, one last question for lucky winner, guys. Are you guys ready?
You're
All right.
ready.
All right. It's a little bit tricky one, but it's
Okay, I think the question
I
was,
think, did you understand the question?
yeah, I think they didn't understand it.
I
Was
think
worded. The way it was worded.
VP's the way it was
I
what
think
I'll make it a little bit tricky question.
the
So,
response is still correct, I think, because Lambda can still be triggered.
Yeah, so they are
Yes.
correct based off of
They are
yeah, you can
correct.
still right. You can still trigger. Yeah, that's true.
Tobenna.
You can still trigger Lambda. That's true. But you can still trigger Lambda.
I think what you were trying to
So
say was what services can trigger
Other companies, yeah.
and
yeah, I
trigger
think right. I think everybody
some
got it. You can also trigger Lambda function from another Lambda function. That could be possible. So you can schedule Lambda function to run. Okay, so I think
who is the first person?
Tobenna
Codina.
had it.
Again.
Did Codina won already? If Codina's already
Yeah.
won, Codina no. So we're gonna give it to Olushola has already.
Ulushoga has one too.
Exactly.
So we give it to
Victor.
Victor. Yes. Victor.
Yeah, Victor that wants us to use Python. He's a Pythonista.
So we're gonna give it to Victor. Congratulations, Victor.
Yeah, Femi, we'll answer your question. Don't worry, I have that covered as well. So answer your question.
I don't know if we have a room for questions.
Yes.
Tobenna?
So once we run this
Okay.
API now, I'll take questions. Okay, so we're going to test the API. It's been deployed. We didn't have any issues, thank God. So we'll just copy the URL. We can see that the URL is different. It has /raffle and it's a post endpoint. So we're just going to copy it. And test it out. There's this thing blocking my site. Okay, so test it out. Let's open this well. Close this. And we'll do posts now. And then we'll add our body. Right, but we're going to just pass ANUG. We should get a 400. So pass this, you can see we have 400 bad requests. We can see the message of invalid request. So we've already done request validation here. So let's try passing only first name. Let me just use my name so that I don't murder anybody's name. You should also still get invalid request. But when I pass first name and last name, the amount of time it took me now to do this, I could have typed it out with laziness. Sometimes you can be lazy and then you end up doing more work. But yeah, so now we've gotten, dear Tobenna, Nwokike, your raffle code is blah, blah, blah. Let's change the name. Let me use my younger brother's name. I'm sure he'll be so proud of himself now. That is changing, and then you see that the raffle code is being generated just like we wanted. So I think that wraps it up for our hands-on. Like I said, thank you so much, guys. I'll move back to the slides so that we can wrap up officially. Here's my slide again. Okay, this is it. So we're done. If you want to learn serverless, there are a lot of resources to learn. These are 3 of them. I'll still be sharing them with Akeem after now.
Thank you.
And then for our next class, I'm going to come with some vouchers for the one for Serverless Guru. So I'm going to be giving out some for that.
Thank you.
But the first one is free. That is on AWS Skill Builder. You can learn serverless for free. And then now, question time. So if there are any questions, if there's anything, please let me know now. Okay, I already had one question. So I already had a question from, yes, so for a new platform for a beginner, is there a platform for a new beginner to learn? You can learn on YouTube. You can also learn on AWS Skill Builder. And then you can also, there's this place called Serverless Land where you can get started as well. So there's a plethora of resources to learn from, but I'll curate them and send them to Akeem. Okay, can I drop the links on the chat? I mean, I can, but I don't want us to take so much time doing that, but let's see. Let me just do this. Previous slide. Let's see if we can just copy it. Okay. So this one is AWS Skill Builder, free. This is Serverless Guru, which is where I work. In fact, it's our CEO that did this course. So it's paid, but I'll get you guys some vouchers from the next meeting. Okay, so trade-off from I have a question. Okay, first I'll go with the first question. This is also paid. This is actually the third one I'll post now is actually the best course I've used so far. It's on Udemy. It's really nice. What programming language do you suggest for non-developers who want to build serverless skill, please? I usually run away from this question, but I'll try and answer it and then let you decide. Because for me, I've built with a lot of languages. I've built with at least 8 languages that I can remember off the top of my head because of the length of my career. But I would say for a beginner, what I have seen in the industry, because I've also, trained engineers before. It's one of the things I'm not happy that I don't have as much time now to do. But I used to train engineers in the past. I've seen that for getting started with serverless, your best bet is to go with JavaScript most times for beginners. Or it's either JavaScript or Python. But I've seen that JavaScript usually has more resources and there's more for a beginner to get support with JavaScript, so with Node.js. That's what I would say. And then the trade-off between using Terraform, CloudFormation, compared to serverless. So Terraform and CloudFormation give you more flexibility, right? But serverless framework, you can actually write CloudFormation syntax there. You can write CloudFormation inside serverless framework. So you can still use serverless framework and write your CloudFormation inside of it. So you're not losing out on CloudFormation because you're using serverless framework. However, the other thing is with Terraform, this is more, what I'm going to say now is more for people that are very advanced in the field. So with Terraform is usually better if you want to, it's crazy, but some services are not supported by CloudFormation. And it's weird because AWS owns CloudFormation, but some services on AWS, you can't define them on CloudFormation. I had that problem at my place of work recently, so we had to use Terraform for that specific service. It's one of their earlier services around searching. So it depends on what you want to use. I find serverless framework to be very easy to get started with. But if you now get too advanced, then use Terraform or even CloudFormation, depending on what you want to use. Is it open source? I'm not sure. Something I need to check, but you can also check as well. When you say serverless open source, do you mean serverless framework or do you mean serverless as a concept? If it's as a concept, then it's a concept, so it's open for everybody to, learn and build with. Every cloud provider has their own serverless offerings. But if you're talking about serverless framework, I'm not sure if it's open source. I'm not sure about that. If you have an app with 1,000 users and you decide to use serverless for sending out event emails, and the serverless spins up an instance, how many instances will be spinned up? Say if 300 mails events trigger the Lambda function. So a function is spun up every time a request comes in, or like a mini instance, is spun up. There's some nuances around that. There's a lot of not nuances, but a lot of technical stuff around that. So if those requests all come in at the same time, then it will be spun up. It will spin up an instance for each of the functions. But if they come in at different times, there's something called reuse. So an instance that is spun up for a function does not die immediately. There's a period of time for which it is alive. So if requests are coming in, it can service those requests. I don't know if what I'm saying makes sense, but that's the answer to your question. Yes, so the recorded session will be sent. Then what's the limitation of Lambda? So like every other thing, Lambda has limitations. Like everything out there, Lambda has limitations. This is meant for you to run things that are short and straight to the point. Lambda has a timeout of 15 minutes right now. So if your process is going to run for more than 15 minutes, it will time out. API Gateway, on the other hand, has a timeout of 29 seconds. So if you're connecting an API gateway, your request should not run more than 29 seconds, right? And that's why Lambda API gateway, those things are built for event-driven programming. So you send an event and you don't necessarily have to wait. So there's a 15 minutes here, like you said, timeout for Lambda, but API gateway is 29 seconds. Which can be a limitation, but anything you're building that takes that amount of time, you probably shouldn't be using a Lambda. You should probably be using, other offerings like Fargate for your containers. So That's it. Is it possible to use Lambda to send automated mail to various number of people? Yes. So you just have to fetch those mails from somewhere, right? If you're fetching your mails from somewhere, then you can push it out. You can send out those mails to whoever and whatever amount of people you want to send it out to. So long as those mails will not run, that process will not run for more than 15 minutes, then you're fine. Then if I deploy a function on US East 1 and API gateway in US West 2, will the application, will making a request to the endpoint work? I've never actually done that. I usually deploy my stuff in the same region, right? So my Lambda, my API gateway, I usually deploy them in the same region. Why? Just because of the fact, I know there's a way you can do it, right? But when you're using frameworks like serverless framework or like CloudFormation or Terraform, it's best, usually you're defining your region, right? But there's a way to do this. Can it be done? Yes, it can be done. But I would usually advise against that. That's my personal opinion. Okay. So VP. Okay, so I think those are all the questions for now. Akeem, I think I'll hand back to you.
Thank you very much, Tobenna. That was awesome. So I don't hold anybody AWS credit, so I already sent you direct message. So that voucher is for AWS services. So you can go in to AWS, your AWS account, and activate the expire. I put the expiration date in there so you can use it up to that. So that's what it's for. So you can use it to apply on your AWS account for any services that you're using. So thank you guys. This was very amazing workshop. I hope all of us learned, and we're looking forward for the part 2 of this event. So stay tuned, guys. And yeah, next part 2, there's more chances to win. So please, guys, join for the part 2. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a wonderful day. Thank you, Tobenna, for taking your time out of your busy schedules. So part 2, we're gonna post part 2 on the meetup page, and also we will share it in all the chat room, so you guys will be able to see that as well. Just follow us on the meetup page on WhatsApp, and you'll be able to get all the information that is needed. And also the recording as well will be sent out on our YouTube channel. So stay tuned for that as well. Thank you, and have a wonderful day and enjoy your weekends. We'll see you in the next part 2. Take care.
Thanks, guys. See you soon.
Take care. Bye-bye, guys. The WhatsApp, like somebody's asking for the WhatsApp. We'll post it again. Let me share it with you guys. Hold on, just bear with me. Just 1 second. So let me share my screen. So you guys can just scan it. Let me just share my screen real quick.